Hello, ant keepers! Welcome back to another episode of my antics. I'm making this video today because I keep seeing the rookie mistakes being made by a lot of new ant keepers, but some that you would expect better from. So while I feed some of the colonies into my antics room, I want to talk about this and exactly what the do's and don'ts are, not only for beginning ant keeping, but from moving away from being the beginner label more into the middle experienced ant keeper and eventually into being an expert, knowing all the species, all the care guides, and all the different methods and maneuvers you can do to take care of your colonies. One of the big things that I've been seeing lately is a lot of new ant keepers putting a lone queen in a decent sized nest. It's a terrible, terrible idea, and it seems like no matter how many times people warn, tell them it's a bad idea, they just do it anyways. So that's going to be number one I want to talk about. And we're going to explain exactly why it's a bad idea, along with other properties, and how you can just hold on a little longer to the point where they are actually ready to move into a nest. You see, nests in general are great for any colony that's ready to move out of a test tube and into a decent design like we have behind us, where the colony will continue to grow, prosper, and keep a stress level to a minimum. When you put a lone queen into a nest, her pheromones are so spread out, it stresses her to the max. Now imagine, here, let's put it in perspective. Let's say this line is a test tube. She walks back and forth in that test tube all day, laying down pheromones. She knows this test tube as her home. Now let's say we take her out of our small little square here, and we put her into a nest. She automatically has a lot more room, a lot of unknowns where she doesn't feel safe, and the pheromones don't get as evenly distributed throughout the whole nest. This makes her extremely stressed out, makes her feel like there are unknown dangers, possibly going to cause her death or injure her. Even if she has mature brood, this will cause her to eat it because she's scared that she's not in an enclosed area where she feels safe. Other things I should mention when it comes to nests in general. Full acrylic nests, see-through nests, full plastic nests, and even some nests that have wood or some kind of an acrylic but have a lot of open light sources where light can come into the nest. Those are considered temporary nests and are no good for long-term homes. I see a lot of new ant keepers buying the cheap acrylic nests, and it's really not where we are in the hobby. It's a different page. It's the short-term version. You buy these acrylic nests when you want to buy 100 workers from Uncle Milton's, and you want a good way to study and watch how they interact with each other and move around objects and food. With that said, that's mainly what those are used for. They don't have the components to be a proper long-term home. And in turn, by putting a real queen and colony into there that you're expecting to grow long-term, there's too much light, there's not enough humidity or moisture, there's way too many escape options, especially the ones with the screws. And when you're a young queen and a young colony, the last thing you want to see are giant parts moving around you all day, because ants pick up on that. Ants have some pretty good vision for insects, and they can see giant arms, giant bodies of humans moving around, and that's like end of the world apocalypse to them. That's the last thing they should have to see multiple times a day. And that brings us back to why you should only maintenance your young colonies once to 2 times a week. Now then, when a colony does have 20 plus workers, let's go back to the pheromone drawing. Instead of just these spread apart pheromone trails when the queen moves around, there's many pheromone trails. Many workers and majors are moving around that area, on the walls, on the ceiling, on the ground. And no matter where they go in their nest, there's a very strong pheromone trail, which they pick up on and they know is a safe area which they consider home. Next, I kind of want to talk about mold. Mold has actually been an issue that a couple ant keepers have been dealing with lately, and I kind of want to talk about it a little bit, just so we can say that we did go over it, and ways that you can prevent it from happening. I've seen that towards the end of the year, more or less, I don't know if it has anything to do with it, but a lot of the feeders have been growing mold quicker than normal. Now, if you have multiple colonies that you are feeding, you want to make sure you clean your utensils almost every time you use them. Because if you pick up anything that's moldy in the process, that mold can spread on your tools from every test tube or every nest you use. Even if you leave it for a day or two, the mold can still be alive on where you touched that moldy piece of protein, or possibly even honey, sugar water. It's all possible to have mold on it. With that said, making sure you clean your utensils off with a very, very watered down bleach supplement, or I like to personally use peroxide. I got any peroxide around here I can show you? Alright, well, this is my peroxide right here. I have peroxide, and what I like to do with this peroxide is take my tweezers and switch them out every other test tube. This may sound tedious, but this makes sure that nothing is spreading throughout the test tubes that I am feeding. And it's very important because it only takes one single moment for your queen to die from that mold. She could lick her antennas, lick her feet, her abdomen, and if she brushed past that mold will start growing inside your queen, and you will find her looking like this. These pictures and videos that I'm posting on the small screen now are my own pictures that I had issues with. And even though I've been doing this for a couple years, it does happen. It pops up. I use pokers, tweezers, paintbrushes continuously, and there's always a chance of contamination if you're not careful. While I'm talking to you guys, let me take a quick peek. Perfect. Let me make sure that I'm looking at this right. Can we zoom into this? Let's see. I'm going to zoom us in. Hang on. Oh. Like this, for example. Here's some mold right here, and it's definitely something that we need to take care of right away. I'm going to take the tweezers I was just using, put them in the peroxide, take the new tweezers, even if they're still wet, when you're grabbing mold and not touching anything like feeders, it's okay. Take that, put it in the trash. Now this is when you can grab a paper towel. It's already squirted, but squirt it one time to get it damp. Then you can slowly start from the inside and drag it out. This will grab all of those mold spores, because let's face it, if it's in there with them, there's definitely mold spores around, even if there was no wind, because we know that our queen or young colonies have been moving around that since it started to grow. Next of all, we got to talk about it. You guys, you're looking at your young colonies and queens too much, and it's causing them to be seriously stressed out. If you've seen anything about my antics, I talk about it many, many times. You can't do too much with your young queens and colonies. One time or two to the very maximum, and only to remove the old food and honey. That's the only time, excuse me, you should be pulling out your colonies when they're young. There's too much risk involved in them being exposed to light for prolonged periods of time. Ants are creatures that live underground, in wood, under concrete, in your house walls. But regardless of all that, they are in an area that's completely dark all the time. There is no ant queen in the history of ant queens that ever wanted to be in the daylight, more for that periodic time of nuptial flights. And we all have to remember that. Every time you bring your young colonies out, keep in mind that this may be longer than she should have been in any kind of light. And we know as well as she does that all she wants to do is go back to a dark area where she can feel safe. Let me think. What else can we talk about here? We've talked about, excuse me, varieties of food before. I think that's another great thing to touch base on as well. I find myself doing it sometimes too, so I can't even blame you guys for it, but if I could give myself some good advice that I've told myself in the past and maybe forgot about, switch up the proteins, switch up the sugar, switch up what you give your queen on a week-to-week basis. This will make sure that she's never in that boring state like, what did I talk about in the past? If you ate a hot dog every day for a week, you'd be sick of hot dogs. It's the same story, more or less. So treat your queens like children. Make sure they always have something exciting to look forward to. Next up, I want to talk about beginner-friendly and unbeginner-friendly species. This is actually what I wanted to end the video with. So I guess this is as good as time as ever. Beginner-friendly species, simply put, are species that beginning ant keepers can have little to low issues with while growing them into a colony. We've talked about carpenter ants, garden ants, pavement ants, and those are some of the best beginning species because they are hardy. They can bounce back from mistakes when we make them. They can hold their own if something goes wrong in the test tube. They make sure that they can endure and be in a stressful situation a little longer than some of the other species that go towards mid and end level care for expert ant keepers. Species like harvesters would be called middle class species. Harvesters, formicas, let's see what else here, pyramid ants, species like them are in the middle for a reason. They're not going to be able to bounce back as easy from the mistakes you make, and they may die in the process if you're not ready to care for their exact methods needed to make sure that they can succeed. There are many care guides on the internet for beginner, medium, and end-level care. But it's sad to say that there's a giant hole missing in the middle of it. Sort of like a void. Even though it's been better since when I began so many years ago, I can tell you straight up that I couldn't find enough information. And the information that I found and the information that people told me were conflicting against each other. So the more I learned as I started out, the more questions I had going along the path. That's where a community comes in, or I come in. If any of you, for any reason whatsoever, have a question, need help, want advice on how to do this, that, or another, give me a ring, give me a text message, find a way to reach out to me on the website, and I would be more than happy to work with you step by step to make sure that everything is properly put, like a puzzle piece, on the road to happiness. And that's where happy ant keeping comes from. I had somebody ask me, Nate, what exactly does happy ant keeping mean? And I've been saying it so long it just kind of became a hashtag phrase. What happy ant keeping truly means is being happy with the ants that you are keeping. There are no issues going on. There is nothing falling off the ledge. Everything is in a happy environment and successfully growing healthy, mite-free, parasite-free, into their mature phases and ever on forward. What would unhappy ant keeping be? It would be massive mite outbreak, giant mold bursts. It would be your queen dying, your colony wiping, your nest falling off the table. You're running out of water. You forget to feed your ants. You don't give them enough honey. You keep them in the light all day. Things go wrong. That's unhappy ant keeping. And that's not what we're going for. And that's why I make these videos. Happy ant keeping simply means that everything is how it should be, and you're enjoying the hobby to the fullest, the way that you imagined when you started out. No stress, no burdens, no reaching out for help in a panic, just content, feeling calm, and watching your ants exactly what the hobby entails. Yeah, in states. Huh. Anyway, so that's what happy ant keeping mean, and with that said, I thought I'd be feeding ants while I was making this video, but I think I got more wrapped up talking to you guys. This is not a normal video. I'm not going to edit this. I'm going to plop this on for you guys, and hopefully you get something out of it. And if you do, I'm very happy for you, because ant keeping, even in the mid-level stages, there is so much more to discover. If I had to wrap it up with one thing, new ant keepers and mid-level ant keepers, don't be that dumb guy who goes into the endgame species thinking you can handle it because you watched some videos and read a couple articles online. Don't be that idiot who spends a bunch of money on epic species and kill them right away because you really truly don't know what you're doing. I don't know how to be more uncritical and not brutally honest in this. You guys, you gotta really put yourself in check here. Honeypots, trap jaws, atta, turtle ants. The list goes on. If you're not 4 to 5 years into a successful collection, even bigger than what we have going on back here, then maybe, just maybe, it's not your time. But you will know. The day will come when you look up, you think to yourself, you shake your head and you go, now is the time for me to raise honeypots. Or now is the time for me to try trapjaw ants. And before you can say that with 1,000% confidence, you're having issues with beginner species. You don't really know how to feed your colonies. If anything other than I am ready pops into your head, then you are not ready. Stay away from them, admire them from afar, sort of like we admire the species that we don't have in the United States. There are so many amazing species in the world that us United States ant keepers just can't acquire. And that's not a bad thing. It's not Pokemon. We don't have to catch it all. But we can admire them from afar. And that's what I'm asking you ant keepers to do right now. Admire the species that you find the coolest from afar until you have a lot of success under your belt and you know the moment has come where you are ready to raise these species. Well, that's all I got for you. I hope you all enjoyed, ladies and gentlemen. Have a wonderful night. And now that you know the meaning of it, happy ant